Before you on this very tier maker page is every current top 50 OSU player in the game, and I'm going to tier all of them, but it's not going to be by skill. It'll be purely based off of my opinion on their username. Nothing about them as a player, nothing about anything other than purely their username. Of course, we have to start from the bottom and work our way up. Andros, I think it works pretty well, but I think there's something about the letter chemistry. Maybe it's the D and the R that makes it a little off. I think we can start the list at a solid B. Reedcat. Okay, Reedcat is a very clear-cut pronunciation, right? It's pretty clear how to pronounce this name. The only thing is the K-A-T-T is kind of like, it reminds me of like Leet speak spelling. It almost seems like you didn't get your main username and you had to do like a variant. With that, I think this is another B. Plasma. Okay, plasma is a very cool word, I would say. And obviously it's an actual word, so it's pretty clear how to pronounce it. Honestly, I don't have too much wrong with this name. Although I think there's something about it that I wouldn't give it an S for. I think it's a pretty solid A tier name though. I think it's because of the like the letters at the end. Something about it is like not S, but it's still a very cool name. I'll give it a solid A. It's a solid A. Yeah, it reminds me of like slime. I think that's what it is. Milk Teaism. Milk Teaism is actually pretty good. I think this is a pretty good name. Mostly because milk tea is a very like aesthetic concept and it's very clear to pronounce. I think the only thing is it's kind of long. Like if I'm trying to think of like how to shorthand the name Milk Teaism to like actually refer to this person without just saying the whole thing. Maybe it's just milk. Maybe it's just milk or milk tea. It feels like a mouthful to say, but aside from that, like I like the aesthetic and it's very clear to pronounce. This is another solid A. Darabon, honestly, is I think what every username should strive towards. Darabon is quite clear to pronounce, at least I think so. It's quite short, and honestly, it feels like a username. You know what I mean? Like it feels like a name. I think that's actually something that's really important when it comes to usernames, obviously. So solid. The letter chemistry is just there. Darabon, well done. You are our first S tier username. Woo! In before, next up. This is kind of the opposite feeling. I get the opposite feeling from in before as with Darabon in terms of like, it doesn't feel like a name that I would call someone. It's just a phrase, I guess. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, it's obviously clear to pronounce, but something's not right here. It's not like that's someone's username. Maybe it's just me. And again, this is a personal list, but just purely based off the username, I would probably have to put this in C. All right, Eternum. Honestly, I like Eternum. I definitely like the name Eternum. I think something about it is a little like nasally feeling. I think it's the NUM at the end. It's like something about the letter chemistry isn't like super like, to strive for. But aside from that, pretty clear to pronounce, pretty short. It's one of those names that like leaves an impact on you, like Eternum. Pretty solid. I think aside from the slight letter chemistry, which is really just my personal bias, I think this name is a solid A. All right, Secret Box or A Secret Box. Honestly, I think without the A in the name, I think it would be a lot better if it was just Secret Box. I don't know if it was taken or if this is like how it's supposed to be or if there's like lore behind A Secret Box specifically. I think the A just like makes it so cluttered that I can't give it anything higher than a B. I think that's really what it is. If it was just Secret Box, I would probably give it an A. Probably because I feel like it's very, very, very hard to make a username work when it's like two words put together where the first letter of each is capitalized. Like my username is like that as well, digitalhypno. And it's just such an outdated style of username, I feel like. But in the way it is now with A Secret Box, I would have to give it a B. Flying Tuna. Okay, maybe it's just because I'm biased by the aesthetic that Flying Tuna has with like his sort of brand and graphics, and his avatars always look really cool. Man, he's just a cool guy. He's just a cool guy. It does have that format that I was talking about with like two words put together, but honestly, I think Flying Tuna works pretty well. I think it works pretty well. I would give this name a solid A. Umbre is one of those names. Okay, so it's short. I'll give it that. It's short. It's pretty clear to pronounce, but something about the way that you say it it's the letter chemistry. It's really the letter chemistry where when you say ombre, it's the ending. I think it's the ending where it kind of just like fades out instead of like really having a definitive like stopping point to the name. You know what I mean? It feels a little mushy. I don't know. That's just my personal feeling, but I think it's a pretty solid name. It's very unique. And again, it's quite short. And I think overall, I would probably give it a B just purely based on the letter chemistry. That kind of knocks it down, at least for me personally. But I think it definitely has its unique characteristics. Kurumi W. I'm going to assume that the W is there just kind of because Kurumi by itself was taken. If I had to guess. Kurumu? Oh, I would not read it that way. I would definitely not do that. It has to be Kurumi W. If it was supposed to be just Kurumi by itself, honestly, I think that's not bad. I would probably give it a B or A. The W kind of messes with the aesthetic a little bit. It kind of feels like what is the W doing there? Honestly, it's not too offensive in any way. And I think that's honestly better than nothing with a lot of usernames. So I would give this, I think the W just throws me off so much. I think I would have to give this a C. It's just like you look at it and something's not right. Something's not right. Nanoya kind of has the same energy as Umbre in that it makes you feel claustrophobic when I say the name Nanoya. Yeah, maybe it's the nasal feeling that I'm getting. But something about the letter chemistry isn't working out there. But it is pretty short. It's pretty clear to pronounce. Honestly, I think if not for the letter chemistry, it would be a pretty solid name. I'll have to give this one a B, personally. Kazam ABC. So this one is definitely Kazam and then ABC, right? Like there's no disputing that. But I don't know about the Zam part. Like, you can definitely start a name with KA. Like, I think Kablaze is a really good example. Kablaze is a really solid... I would probably give that S tier, Kablaze. But the Zam just... I feel like it doesn't mesh well, you know? And then the ABC kind of does the same thing as the W here, where it just kind of, like, tacks on something that feels like it's only there because Kazam by itself wasn't available. With that, I think I would also give this name a C. Luciano. Okay, Luciano is a good example of letter chemistry working out well. Luciano is a really solid name, I would say. And again, it's one of those things that really feels like a username. I feel like something about the letter chemistry isn't fully speaking to me. I think I would have to give this an A. I can't quite give it an S. Yeah, it is an actual name. That's true. All right, Scytho. So I've never had a problem figuring out how to pronounce Scytho. I've never read it as Scytho or Scytho. It's definitely Scytho to me. Honestly, it's very like, it has that punch, you know, Scytho. It actually works really well as a username. It's short, clear to pronounce, at least for me, quite memorable, and the letter chemistry is just there. I don't know what else to say. Scytho, this is an S tier username. Apostle feels solid. It's definitely at least an A tier name. I think the letter chemistry is good. It's obviously clear to pronounce. Not to say that if it was just Aposto, it would be any better, but something about like the end of it is like messing with the chemistry a little bit. I would have to give it an A. I think I would have to give it an A. It feels akin to Luciano to me. Binoca Louca just means crazy worm in Portuguese. I was trying to figure out what that meant yesterday when I was making this tier list. Man, it's really, you can tell it's not a serious name, but with that, when I see it anywhere, I'm just like, man, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. That's the best way I can put it. This name, I think, has to be D. But you can tell that it's not really a serious username, so I think it's okay with being a D. Okay, Zaki. The Qs, oh my god, the Qs. There's something about it. Something about the Qs is like, okay, let's go through the good. Zaki is very clear to pronounce and definitely feels like a name, but the Qs just mess with the letter chemistry so much that I have to put this in C. It just knocks it down so far, at least for me personally. I just don't know how it got knocked down so far, but that's just what happened. Enri is another really good example of short, unique, clear to pronounce, and the letter chemistry is just there. No words for Enri. This is a solid S tier username. It's just like no BS, you know what I mean? This is like a case study of a good username. All right, next up is Zudinator. Honestly, Zudinator, despite being very kind of unique as a username with the letters, it does a really good job, I think, with the letter chemistry. It works very well. It's very clear to pronounce, and you can very clearly just call them Zudi. You can just shorten it to Zudi very easily. I would probably have to give S tier. I think it does a really good job with these letters. I think it's really hard to make a lot of these letters work, especially in the same name. All right, Rupertian. The letter chemistry does work pretty well. I would say it works pretty well, and it's clear to pronounce. It feels a little on the longer side. For some reason, Zudinator, despite being relatively long, doesn't feel very long to me. But Rupertian is like at that cutting point, you know what I mean? I think something about the letter chemistry as well. It might be the U. I think other than the slight letter chemistry is also a pretty solid username. I would put this in A tier. Flaro or Flaro? Does anyone say Flaro? I think pretty much everyone should say Flaro, right? Flaro I think works pretty well. The letter chemistry. Oh god, here we go again. The letter chemistry. I think it's the L and the R kind of like combined together like that. It feels a little squished together. Yeah, flare O like separately. It kind of feels like you just squished it together, and it feels a little squished. You know what I mean? I think aside from that, Flaro is a pretty solid username. It's honestly pretty clear to pronounce, I feel like, and pretty short, pretty memorable. I would probably put this in A tier. Okay, Choco Pafe. Is that how you pronounce it? So this is a Japanese player, and I didn't know if there's like more lore to this username that I don't know about, but it's one of those usernames with like 2 words put together that I feel like is just average. Like it's just average. I don't know how else to put it. I think long story short, this name would definitely be B tier. Okay, Rectigon is another one of those names where like you wouldn't expect these letters to work well together, but something about the chemistry actually lines up pretty well. I think Rectigon, it's like a journey from the calm and clear like RE to the KTYG. It doesn't look like it should work, but it actually works really well. It's quite clear to pronounce, quite memorable, and honestly, I would give this name a solid A. I think the only thing is probably the visual aesthetic is not there enough to give it an S. Varvalian. It takes the aesthetic of the letter V and just makes it shine, I think. I would say it's quite aesthetic, and the letter chemistry works really, really well. It's also very clear to pronounce. Honestly, Varvalian is an S tier username, for sure. Zoomer, oh, man. What? What's going on here? So obviously it's clear to pronounce, and it's relatively short. And I think that's all it has going for it. Something about the way that you pronounce it and the letter chemistry and everything, I can't give this higher than a C. I just can't. It just doesn't really feel like something that you would want to call someone as their name. I think that's a big thing. Along with the letter chemistry, it just feels a little off to say. Next up, Chocomint. So obviously this is formerly known as Cookie Z, which I think is also a pretty solid username. I think I would give Cookie Z an A. Chocomint, honestly, it's very clear to pronounce. I think the letter chemistry works well, and like the concept that it paints in your head is also really nice, you know? It just actually works really well as a username, I feel like. Chocomint, honestly, despite probably stemming from a meme, I think is an S tier username. Rudge? Isn't that how you pronounce it? That's what I've heard. I would have never guessed how to pronounce this name. Obviously, it's very short, and I don't know. I think that's it, actually. Something about it, like, it's definitely unique, but the letter chemistry doesn't sit with me, and it's obviously, like, not very clear to pronounce. I would probably have to give this a B. It's like on the edge of B and C for me. I would probably put it at C just purely based on the aesthetic. Just doesn't sit well with me. Arison, honestly, is one of the greatest rebrands of OSU history. Immediately when he name changed to Arison from Gaze McGee, everyone forgot about his old username. And that almost never happens, I feel like. Especially if you're someone who's been around for a very long time. Arison, it's very short, definitely feels like a name. From what I know, it's actually his middle name, which is just beast, by the way. That's just insane. I just don't know what to say. Arison, the letter chemistry is amazing. It's very clear to pronounce. Actually, I don't think so. Because I think a lot of people would say Arison. When I first saw it, I didn't know how to pronounce it. But I have to look past that just because everything just screams green light on this username. It's just so good. Arison is 100% an S tier username. Intercambing or intercambing. So it's semantically in the form of a word, which is a little tricky to figure out, like, is this actually something that you're supposed to call this person? It's one of those names that doesn't quite feel like a name to call someone. It's pretty long. I think the only thing I can give it is that it's pretty clear to pronounce, I think, for the most part. Or you can like look at it and it definitely looks like something that you should be able to pronounce. But aside from that, like, I don't quite know what I would call this person, because I feel like just shortening it to inter, no one does that. I'm pretty sure no one does that. You kind of have to say the full name. Intercambing would probably have to be a C for me. It just doesn't line up. Okay, Nahus, is that how you pronounce it with a silent G? It's clearly not like an English first username. Pretty sure it's Nahus? Oh god. Honestly, I think if I look past my American biases with this name, I think it works pretty well. Like, if it was in a language that like all these sounds or letter combinations made sense to you, I think it would actually work pretty well, because it's pretty short. At least from what I can see, it's pretty memorable, and the letter chemistry, with everything put together, I would have to give this a B. Okay, Malashevsky. I think this name single-handedly taught a lot of the OC community some basic Polish pronunciation because of how prevalent this name is. This guy went from Rystal, which was the first name that I think people recognized him from, to Chomik Box, which was kind of this sort of like intermediate phase where you're kind of like, you know, growing pains, trying to name change, but like not sure what to name change to. Because Tormik Box didn't last very long, and everyone just called him Ristel anyway. Because honestly, Ristel is probably S tier for me. But Malashevsky, honestly, is very memorable. I think the only thing is like, yeah, shortening it to Malice feels like a disservice to the name. Maybe it's just me. I would probably have to give this name an A. Honestly, I think it's actually a pretty cool name to pronounce. It's probably very, like, somewhat generic of a Polish name, I think. Like, it definitely has those, like, Polish name semantics, you know what I mean? The only thing is you have to learn how to pronounce it, and for a lot of people, it's just very intimidating to look at if you don't know how to read it. But once you get past that, pretty good. Okay, Boja the Rock. I don't really know what to say about Boja the Rock. It's really funny. I think it's just so, like, I can't give it a D, because it's just such a funny username to me. I don't know. I would probably give it a C. I would have to give Boja the Rock a C. Rafis. Honestly, Rafis is another good case study of everything kind of coming together. It's very unique. It's very clear to pronounce. And the letter chemistry actually works pretty well. I think the R, F, and S all kind of work together. Long story short, I would give Rafis an S tier. Okay, Siru. It ticks all the boxes except for probably letter chemistry for me. There isn't too much for me to say with this name. I think it's the C for the most part. I would give it an A. I think it works pretty well. It's very short. I think one thing is that I'm pretty biased towards short usernames. I think that helps a lot for me. Like just 2 syllables, very straight to the point. The only thing there for me is the letter chemistry. Okay, Karcher. Karcher is one of those names that you can have a lot of fun with. I think aside from the brackets, it would definitely be probably S. But I think just to be on the safe side with the brackets and everything, I would probably have to give this name an A. Arnold 24x24. I can't give it higher than a B. That's definitely my cap on this name. It's probably going to be either a B or a C. The numbers don't do it any favors. I don't know what the story is behind the 24x24. I want to say it's kind of generic. Just purely based off the username, I just can't do it. I would probably just give it a C. Nineric? Is it Nineric? Is that how you pronounce it? It's definitely not Nineric, even though it looks like it could be. The letter chemistry is actually pretty good, but it's very hard for me to figure out how to pronounce. It does what a username should do, but on a very simple level. I think the most I can give this is probably a B. Window Life. Honestly, Window Life is very nice to pronounce. I think Window Life actually works really well as a username. It's one of those names, again, that's like 2 words put together, but actually works pretty well. Apparently, the original name of Window Life is Wind Wolfie, and just they name changed by just mixing the letters around. I think Window Life is nicer than Wind Wolfie. Window Life is a lot easier to pronounce. Window Life, honestly, I would give this an A. I think it takes the format of 2 words put together and is definitely one of the better forms of that. I think it's just the aesthetic of Window Life. Just the ease of pronunciation and the letter chemistry actually works really well with that name. All right, Ryuke is definitely one of those names that it's tricky to pronounce at first glance. I mean, his Twitch bio is literally just how to actually pronounce the name so that people don't say Ryuk. Aside from that, Ryuke, it's very, if you know how to actually read it, it flows off the tongue. It definitely feels like a name. It's also very short, which helps a lot. But the letter chemistry is a little off. It's like all strong letters, you know what I mean? Ryuke, I think aside from the ease of pronunciation and a bit of the letter chemistry, which I can look past, honestly, I think Ryuke is probably an A tier. Mathy is another one of those names that works pretty well. I think it ticks most of the boxes. It's obviously very clear to pronounce, very unique, and the letter chemistry is, I would say, up there. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I think it works pretty well. Honestly, I think Mathy ticks all the same boxes that Rafis does. Mathy is just the English version of his name. Oh, interesting. Honestly, I think it works well as a username. Not gonna lie. I think it's very recognizable and unique. Honestly, I would give Mathy and S. All right, Ciccone. That's how you pronounce it, right? At least in English. I can't really see any other way to pronounce it. I would probably put it in A or B. Honestly, the letter chemistry is not that bad, now that I think about it. But I think where it's lacking is the pronunciation aspect. I feel like saying the name Ciccone doesn't feel very aesthetic, even though the letter chemistry actually works pretty well. I think with all that, I would probably have to give it a B just because the way that it's pronounced, at least the way that we're pronouncing it, is just a little off. You put stress on the first syllable. Chickeny? Wait, chicken? Chicken. With everything, I think the ease of pronunciation and the pronunciation itself, I think is just not quite there for this name. I would have to give it a B. Utami. I think Utami is actually pretty clear to pronounce. Honestly, I think it ticks all the same boxes as Ratfus and Mathy, I would have to say. It uses the letter U and it actually makes it work, you know what I mean? I've seen people pronounce it Utami? Utami? Really? I would probably say A or S, but I think just because of the ease of pronunciation, you guys actually have a pretty good point. I think I would have to give Utami probably A. Nyan Potato. Oh, here we go, guys. Here we go. This is like the ultimate 2009, 2010 quirky username. I don't know what else to say. I cannot give this anything higher than a C. I just really cannot. Just purely from a username perspective. Make Nyan Potato a D. At the very least, it's not that bad to pronounce. Why is it the only D rank? It just doesn't tick any boxes. It just doesn't. White cat. White cat. White cat. Honestly, white cat, despite being generic, is actually very fun to pronounce. There's something about saying white cat that actually works really, really well. I think it's hard to give it anything high. I don't think I can give it an S. I would probably give it an A. Just because it takes this format and it almost does the impossible. Like the name White Cat shouldn't actually work, but it does. You know what I mean? I just don't know what else to say. White Cat gets a solid A. Shimon. Shimon is how everyone pronounces it, right? Shimon, honestly, I think works really, really well. The letter chemistry is definitely there. It's short, clear to pronounce. Honestly, Shimon, I would give S. I would actually give Shimon S. I think that's a really solid name. It's very unique. Letter chemistry works well. It just has everything going for it. Aeterna. So Mr. Aeterna has gone through phases of usernames from Zeltal, which I think was honestly pretty solid. Zeltal, I would probably give A, and then went to Mirami, which was very memorable. Mirami, I would probably also give an A, and then switch to Aeterna. I think the thing with Aeterna and his former usernames is that for most people, when they change usernames, there's like one that's kind of not the best choice to call. But with Aeterna, I think the reason why some people use Zeltal, some people use Mirami, and some people say Aeterna, all three of those usernames are actually good, which I think is the issue. Aeterna, it's quite clear to pronounce, despite seeming a little scrambled just purely based on the letter arrangement. It's actually very aesthetic in its own way. I think it's the AE that does it so many favors, because without the AE, I think it's just too cramped with the rest of the letters. I think, honestly, Aeterna, with everything put together, I would have to give this name an S. I think this name definitely deserves an S for doing the impossible, but also special recognition for having two former usernames that are also equally good. YK A rank. Okay, chill, Grubsy, chill. Well, okay, White Cat does the impossible. That name, like, has no right to be fun to say. And I think just purely based on that, I have to give it at least an A. Okay, next up, Akolibed, which is clear to pronounce, but at the same time, something about the letter chemistry and the pronunciation, just the chemistry isn't there for Akolibed. But it's not too long. It's actually kind of on the edge. And it's not super convenient to refer to this person by their name. I think I can't give this higher than a B just because of the aesthetic, and length is like really on the edge there. Lifeline. Honestly, okay, Lifeline, the change from uppercase L to lowercase L actually worked really well for the aesthetic. I think Lifeline lowercase is a lot nicer to look at. Obviously, it's clear to pronounce. The only thing is it doesn't completely feel like a name to call someone. I think that's the only thing preventing it from being S. I would have to give Lifeline an A. Okay, here we go. Emrek. Let's start with the good. Emrek is pretty clear to pronounce. It's very memorable. And it's short. I think the change to all lowercase also did Emrek a lot of favors. And pronouncing it out loud, okay, first of all, it definitely has that feeling of like, this is a name. It definitely has that username feeling to it, rather than something like, I don't know, some of the other names that we talked about earlier. I used to think his name was Mr. Eck. I think I've never had that experience myself. I've only ever heard people say Mr. Eck as like a joke. Although I can definitely see the confusion. The only thing about it is the actual letter aesthetic. Not the way it sounds, but the way it looks. There's something about it that like I can't quite give it an S. But I think it has pretty much everything else going for it. Like it's short, unique, and just all the other boxes are ticked. So honestly, all things considered, Emrek, I would give an A. There you have it. This is my username tier list. Woo, thanks for watching.